Hi, I'm Ryan.
Hey, I'm Nate,
Hello, I'm Steve.
and we are the Dungeon Vets. And today we are doing a book talk on the Crimson Campaign by Brian McClellan. It is book 2 of the Powder Mage trilogy, the first of which we covered in our last book talk. And we're going to be taking a look at it and how we can use these various story elements, and what we can take from them to use in your D&D or role-playing game tables.
So what did we think of the book itself before we talk about D&D?
I really enjoyed this one. This is it's at least my third reread of it. I'll probably go with a 4.5. I don't remember what I gave the first one, probably something similar. But this one is really interesting. This really, you get to see a lot of the cool big battle aspects of Flintlock fantasy in this one, more so than the first, which is great, in my opinion.
Of the Powder Mage trilogy, this is my favorite of all 6 books that take place in this universe by Brian McClellan. I think it's one of the best books that is in my stack of books at home. So I'm going to give it a 4.5 because I don't want to go into higher decimal numbers.
I am going to give this 5 out of 5.
Hey.
I love everyone's arcs. All the side characters are great, and the antagonists and villains, I think, are better in this story than in the first one, or at least that they improved upon what was already there. I think the story, too, is a little bit more... I gave a 4.5 to Promise of Blood, and I would say that the story of Crimson Campaign is more focused. And this audiobook has probably my single favorite moment in all of listening to audiobooks. So
Nick Slows!
You know it, yeah. So 5 out of 5.
Yeah, so in our first book talk for Promise of Blood, we kind of took several different characters, like plots, and smushed them together, kind of as a way, like, what if you wanted to turn this into a campaign, and that would be doable. This one, not so much. Everyone is off doing their own very much separate things. So we're going to look at each of those kind of 3 arcs separately, and we'll start with Tamis. Field Marshal Tamis, the Kez are invading Adro. He's taken his army to meet them. He has this plan that he concocts to take 2 of his best brigades, go underneath the city through these catacombs, and come up behind the Kez army to attack them as they attack the city.
But then it turns out that they get stuck behind enemy lines, and now they are in a completely hostile territory, and the only way out is to march that army through the entire hostile country into the other border, because there's a mountain range that is in the way that you just can't cross. And if Tamis is the DM and you're asking the players to have some agency in the campaign, what are some things that the DM through Tamis might assign for the players to do?
Well, in the book, he does have his powder mages with him. I believe he takes all the powder mages with him.
That's right.
And he kind of tells them to go off and do various individual things, such as scouting. Hunting is a big one because they do not have nearly enough food.
And Powder Mages would be by far the best hunters.
Indeed.
By far the best player characters.
Yeah, exactly. That translates really well into PCs are going to be way more likely to find stuff out in the forest than NPCs.
Yeah, so this is where we get into the real D&D stuff of it, is like, how do I give things to do to a small group of player characters who are part of this larger army?
Yeah, so they're immediately on the defensive this entire campaign, and Tamis would need to know what's behind him and what's in front of him. Maybe you could have a choice to where you guys can scout the front, or you can scout behind us for the enemy army that's chasing. And then the NPC scouts will do the opposite. And they may or may not do as good a job as the PCs. If you have a less aggressive set of PCs, they might want to go and look ahead and look for various like survival or resource management type issues. But if they are aggressive, they might go and try to pick off the enemy army as they're chasing.
Yeah, regardless of which one you do, those like little scouting excursions are great chances to throw in encounters that are on a smaller scale.
Yeah, and I think something that is a heavy theme in this story in the book is the hard nature of what they are being forced to do. There's not enough food. They're marching like double time every day. They're having battles like every other day or something like that because they're being chased by cavalry and they're infantry. You can't have combat all the time. The army scouts can't be finding them every single day and stuff like that. So I think what the DM does here is you use the army itself to create some social encounters, basically. Like, people are exhausted, and so tempers flare, and you have tense social interactions. Things get stolen, maybe. Oh, hey, somebody's stealing food, and we don't know who it is. So we need to figure that out and take care of that. I think that there are a couple of people who are executed in the book for stealing food. You could expand on it a little bit more, and that aspect of like being exhausted. Oh, making exhaustion checks. Hey, I think that's definitely happening. So I would try to incorporate it not just in the terrain and not just in the enemy, but also in the army itself that you are supposed to be protecting and leading.
Pretty early on, it's established that the army has to sacrifice a lot of their horses for food because there just simply isn't enough food to go around. But those that keep the horses, some of the social encounters you mentioned could be a bunch of hungry soldiers eyeing up your horse at night.
And you have to defend your horses against
Yeah.
your own troops, but you're not trying to kill people. That's a pretty interesting combat encounter.
It's really hard to blame them. They're just trying to survive.
Yeah.
So they have cuirassiers and dragoons after them. And of course, they're led by the one competent Kez general.
The one competent, yes.
Yeah. And so having to strike this balance between moving away and getting yourself in a better position to be prepared, or either going a little slower or stopping for longer so you can gather food and resources from around the area, and kind of having a trade-off. So either you can be more prepared for combat or you can get the resources that this army needs.
What if, like, at the beginning of every day, the DM is like, okay, here are two choices. You guys could hard march even farther, or you can take it easy. And those have different effects. One increases morale and the other one gets you farther away from the enemy, maybe towards an objective. It is inevitable that this army is going to catch up to you, but you have to find where is the best place to have that battle. And so having the players scout ahead to try to find where that best battlefield is. Maybe the best one that they come up with is the farthest one away. Or maybe there's another one that has a bunch of resources, but it's harder to defend.
And I think of the stories that we're talking about today, this one is definitely one where everyone agreed that consequences will matter, and you'll have hard choices to make almost every time. That's cool to do every once in a while. There's also an opportunity for not peace talks, I guess they are surrender talks, with the one competent Kez general. What are you trying to do with this encounter for your party? Is there something that the players can have agency in this talk?
No, I definitely think this is the way that this could be done. Imagine that, in the book, Tamis does parlays and stuff, but if this were a campaign, you would ask your party members to do it. And maybe you have the charismatic powder mage go and talk to the general. At the same time, the other powder mages are scouting, looking for hidden troops, that kind of thing. So there's some stuff that they could do. This also opens the opportunity for underhanded tactics. Given the opportunity, I think it will at least be a conversation at the table. Okay, let's parlay with the enemy general, and then we're going to kill him at the parlay. Which would be totally against the code of honor that these generals go after. But is that against the player character code of honor? It would save us a lot of work if this guy was just out of the picture.
That's definitely something that at the very least would cross your players' minds.
Yeah, it absolutely would.
It's a possibility that you as a DM
have
should
to
definitely be
account
prepared for.
There are chaotic evil characters out there.
Yes.
They are just chaotic characters. There's a lot of characters who think they're chaotic good, when in fact they're not.
They're just chaotic neutral.
They're just, I'm so wacky and random.
So what happens then? We're going to really get into this.
What are the consequences?
If you kill Bayon?
Yeah. What are the consequences?
Yeah, so you kill this one competent, honorable general. Now you have the competent, inhonorable general who is actually a high-level sorcerer and will burn you down to the ground if given the chance.
So you're basically like going with you kill the general, do this crazy dishonorable thing, I'm going to punish you.
I wouldn't say punish. It's a consequence.
Let's say that you kill Bayon. Does the king of Deliv still show his appreciation in the same way when you killed another royal under a flag of parley?
Yeah, going ahead. You miss out on a lot of social opportunities that Bayon could have offered had you captured him rather than killed him. And your reputation is tarnished. So you have poor opportunities and poor checks to make ahead of time. That's a good consequence as well.
All right. Then, but, they don't kill Bayon. Professionalism and honor and
they think
all
about
that
it. They think about it a lot, though.
They think about it a lot. And this leads us to big combat encounter by the river.
Yeah, so the party goes up ahead of time and finds this ideal area to defend. And what they come up with is
a ruse. He basically
very cool.
He makes it seem like they are doing a failed and frantic crossing of the river when really they have built up some defenses to help prepare for the oncoming charge of cavalry.
And what defenses did they make?
Holes!
They dug trenches. That's right.
They dug trenches.
Diggy hole.
Good for you, Brian McClellan. We salute you.
The ultimate military weapon is the spade.
It's the E-tool.
Or the E-tool in modern parlance.
Yeah, it has grown over the years. This is a huge battle in both the book and in D&D. So now the DM twists it a little bit into something else. There's this conspiracy that unfolds, and as the party is marching, they're now trying to figure out what the hell's going on in this country.
They go on to find that the farther in they go to these towns, and they find that some of the social encounters you might be able to put in, and they find that these farmers see their uniforms, and they say, "You guys did this to us." And now your party's thinking, "Dude, we just got here." What do you mean? Long story short, you figure out that the Kez army has sent an army in to just despoil the Heartland wearing Adran colors, just to make the Adrans look bad.
Yeah, not just to make them look bad, but to instigate a war against another country. Mm-hmm.
He also attacks the city of Alvation, which is in neighboring Deliv, because this fake Adran army is being led by his arch nemesis, Nixlaus.
Duke Nixlaus.
Yeah, he is the sorcerer who killed his wife.
Mm-hmm.
This changes, though. In the campaign, this is the guy that killed one of your players' wives. Characters' wives, not players' wives.
Hopefully not the player's wife.
This would be a great knife to use against one of your players. One of them has to have given you something. To skip ahead a little bit, the final aspect of this campaign is figuring out that this enemy army of pseudo Adrans has black powder all around the city and is planning to just blow it to high heaven. That's a big freaking problem, and how you need to stop that. And then finally, Nixlaus is getting away. With all of this happening, he is in a carriage and he is on his way out of the city.
Yeah, this chaotic battle thing to me is definitely a backdrop kind of big battle.
Think so?
With, maybe the occasional combat encounter thrown in as you're trying to make your way through all of this chaos towards Nixlaus or towards the black powder caches, whatever your goal might be while this is happening.
Yeah. I would say that, you walk at, the moment when Tamas emerges into the courtyard and sees the mud and fighting and the chaos and stuff. That combat encounter for the party is the party versus 2 wardens. Sure. And that's it.
Yeah,
There's all these other people around you, sure, but they're not a part of the encounter.
Right.
And after you kill the 2 wardens, even though there's still plenty of enemy soldiers around, you are now free to pursue Nixlaus.
That's what you do. You kill the wardens and you go okay, let's get this powder all taken care of so they don't blow up the city. But then one of the players sees Nixlaus getting away.
Then you have kind of the choice. Do we go for the powder? Do we go for Nixlaus? Do we split up? Tough decision. know that know how this choice is going to affect your fellow players, and I think a lot of tables it's okay to be impulsive sometimes like that, but the "it's what my character would do" excuse does not always work.
No.
Doesn't
But
always
it is a
work.
decent excuse if you taunted me with the guy who killed my wife.
Yeah, the DM's begging for it at this point, and
Yeah.
I
Yes.
feel like you can't be blamed for taking the bait when you just set it right in front of them.
If I were the player, I'd be like, "Oh, the DM wants me to do this." But in the book, in the canon campaign of this, at least, they are successful in killing Nick Slaus and saving the city.
And they're able to prove their innocence. And at the end of this campaign, the King of Delev tells Field Marshal Temes and the party that Delev will help Adro in the war against Kez.
So yeah, that kind of wraps up one of 3 major arcs.
Let's move over then to another part of this overall campaign, overall story, however you want to define it, and just talk about the events of Taniel's group.
Taniel time.
It's Taniel time.
So this campaign, in contrast to the last one we just went over with Tamis, is a lot more personal when it comes to the social encounters that happen with the party. At least one of these characters, one or more of them, are suffering from drug addiction.
Yeah, or even just, so I kind of just want to like touch on that. Like, how do you bring, if you do, how do you bring drugs in your campaign, and how do they work? Especially this, like, abuse and addiction and things like that, which obviously your players are going to have to be cool with, but that goes without saying.
As far as world building your own, that could be a pretty deep process. You might want to just go online and try to find a homebrew set
Yeah,
that someone's already done.
and there's tons of them out there.
Yeah, people love fantasy drugs.
Yeah, and so this theme of addiction or overcoming addiction and things like that, and this coming back up in the campaign, I think could be very interesting. Them having to resist the temptation or falling back into it, and the consequences of that. Is that like a save you have to make, or is that a choice that a player makes consciously for their character?
I think that if you really want to go down this hole and find the answers to these questions, that you need to do the work, do your research.
Do your research and get addicted to something yourself so you can write a more compelling story. I'm right there with you, Steve.
Realism helps, as always. But I was just going to say that what is the effect? What is the DC? What is the status that happens to your character? You have to define all these things, and it is a lot of work. And so I would say just find something online, homebrewed.
But this is Dungeons and Dragons, so you can do some weird stuff. Maybe it'd take a wisdom save or a con save to like go against your addiction. But maybe it's something that actually, the more you eat it, it saps your strength and makes you weaker. Or maybe it's something that takes over your whole body and you have to make a charisma.
I'm imagining this drug that gets you high and also like makes you levitate. And so like junkies are just sort of floating around everywhere. They're just out of it, and you push them aside and they just float away.
like balloons just
Yeah.
Dude, and you know what? It's easy too. Like long-term abuse, your bones start getting like hollowed out and stuff, just like osteoporosis.
Ugh, look at those floaters over there.
Yeah, there you
Nice.
go. Boom. We just made a drug.
I think this would be a great opportunity just to work with your DM or work with your player if this is something that they want to push into their character. This is one of their flaws. Work with them to figure out what the substance is, how it's abused, and what the consequences of it are.
Yeah. There are very interesting ways to incorporate vice use into your character. But I just encourage everyone to be careful. Addiction is a disease, and,
Can definitely be a sensitive subject for some people, so make sure everyone at the table is on board.
And all that said, it doesn't even come up into this campaign very often.
No, it doesn't. He kind of...
he overcomes it. And,
Yeah, real quick.
well, he overcomes it real quick because he replaces it with a better drug.
Yeah, that's
being
true.
powder. And because he
That's
takes
true.
it and he's like, oh, how did Mala ever compare to this?
He does kind of have a rough time with like withdrawals and stuff at first, but unlike in real life, he gets over it pretty quickly. And you're right, he does kind of replace it as well.
We could probably say in D&D that like all of his persuasion checks with the higher ups were all at disadvantage because he was withdrawing.
Yeah.
And so that's why Daniel just clashes so hard with authority in this story
Just
arc.
imagine that, he's yelling at some of these higher ups and they looked at him and they go, Daniel, are you floating about an inch off the ground right now? Make all your checks a disadvantage. But yeah, so the crux of the campaign starts with you are wallowing in despair. And now, last you heard, the field marshal, the head of the Adrian army, has gotten stuck in another country. There's the party. You are the best daggone fighters, and you guys need to get to the front. And you find that the front is just a crap show.
Yeah, so, the leader of the army is reported dead now, but regardless, has taken the 2 best brigades with him. And now we have, as well as all the powder mages, i.e. the player characters.
Yeah.
And so now we have an army that is missing its head and a lot of its most powerful resources and troops.
No. And so I think that you balance this campaign between 2 aspects. You can have your combat encounters with the Kez continuing to advance and needing to deal with combat while retreating. That could be an interesting encounter to put together as a DM, because essentially a layer action is all of these friendly NPCs moving back.
Yeah.
And that means all the unfriendly enemies move forward, and it becomes like every round becomes harder and harder for the PCs to endure combat should they choose to endure it. And in this campaign, the PCs are all about enduring combat.
I mean, that's kind of like, that's your goal, right? Is more or less to hold out as long as you can. And, maybe you can do things to try to convince those directly around you to stay and fight a little longer, knowing eventually, though, you're going to have to retreat because you can't defeat a whole army by yourself.
It would certainly be disappointing too if you are the party members and you're wiping through the enemy army in a hot knife through butter, and then you see everybody retreating, and that might be a good way to really set the stage for the secondary part of this campaign, is trying to figure out why the heck the brass keeps calling retreats.
It's glaringly obvious in the story that something is going on. And so I think that translates really well to D&D. When there's a traitor in the higher ups or in the whatever, it comes across pretty easily to the players, and they think to themselves, okay, we need to identify who exactly it is right away.
There is, however, also one very legitimate reason why they're getting the shit kicked out of them, and something that you could have your player characters need to address, and that is the Black Wardens.
Yes.
A new thing in this book. They are powder mages that have been turned into wardens. And so they're basically just extra fast, extra strong, even compared to wardens who are already extra fast and extra strong. And so that, taking care of that problem, facing those directly is kind of a small scale thing in a big battle that your player characters could do. But say even once that's done, they keep calling the retreat. What the hell?
And black powder doesn't ignite around them.
Yeah.
Can't even shoot one.
Another terrifying aspect of their existence.
Yeah, how do you think you put this into D&D 5th edition? Maybe it's a thing that turns magic off around it, so your sorcerer and your wizard are like, oh crap, I can't even misty step away from this thing.
Yeah.
Because it turns off magic. Or maybe it's enchanted in some way to where swords bend as you try to strike its skin or something.
I think there's a lot of good effects that you just add as the things that you can do well actually hurt you here. So if you have magic, it turns off magic.
Definitely give them the aggressive feature, which is as a bonus action, they can move up to their speed against a hostile creature they can see.
Yeah, that totally fits the wardens.
Yeah, don't give them all the buffs we just said.
Yeah.
But, pick whichever one's best for your
No,
party.
yeah, pick 1 or 2 or yeah.
I should also mention, I feel like that the Kez army that they're fighting against reportedly have a god with them. The god, the big one. Numero uno, the head honcho. The big Pumbaa. The grand Poobah. There we go.
So, yeah, this party is responsible for killing, quote unquote, Kresimir at the end of your first major arc in this Powder Mage campaign, just to find out that the god is not dead. The god is in the enemy camp.
Boy, is he angry.
And is angry and crazy.
You did shoot him in the face, and that turns out, even for gods, does have some negative effects.
The clashes with authority, all of the failed persuasion checks that have turned into, you guys are idiots, you should just hold the line, and like the players they don't even care anymore. I can see the players attempting to almost even hold a coup.
Mutiny.
Yeah.
There is some really elegant world building or DMing here. After every single one of these combat encounters, you retreat and you win. You retreat. You win again. The next day, you retreat. But after every one of these encounters, you're going back socially to the nighttime where you're screaming at the brass and they're screaming at you. After 3 times of that, yeah, you're going to be really mad. At the same time, though, the Adrian army isn't the only army out here fighting the Kez. There's a mercenary army right over the hill over there called the Wings of Adam. And they're also fighting and holding their own and pretty much only retreating because the Adrians are.
Mm-hmm.
If the players, I would imagine, would be like, they would straight up desert and just go to the Wings of Adam. That would be far easier.
So they could desert and they could go to the Wings of Adam, and it kind of solves their insubordination issues in a way, but it doesn't solve the larger problem of they keep retreating. You're losing this war.
Yeah.
And that's a good point. It could be like, you could do that, and as players, I could see players leaping at that option before trying to like hold a mutiny and deal with these NPCs that they hate talking to. But you just make it clear to them, if you do this, you can't just like walk through the Adran camp as you please anymore. Therefore, you won't be able to investigate things like the black powder stuff. And so that could keep them there, I think.
I think you're totally right. That is a compelling part of the plot that at least one of the 2 of the players would care about deeply.
I think as a DM, I'm dropping a lot more, or at least a lot more obvious hints that there is a traitor or something. Like there is some particular thing that is causing them to keep calling retreats that you need to find. You know, you can't always force your players to do what you want, but try to imprint on them that the thing you need to do is find evidence and get them arrested. You know, kind of go through the proper channels is how this is actually going to get done, because if you try to take things in your own hands, you're just going to get, arrested yourself.
He's arrested, then released so that he can apologize to Major or newly promoted Colonel Doravir. That doesn't go so well, and he's rearrested. Eventually, Mahali convinces him. He's like, hey, I think Kresimir's going mad, and I don't think that he is going to be able to hold to our bargain much longer anyways, so I think you should probably go after him. So the DM, through the god, provides the party with a means of escaping, getting past the line, and then sneaking into the Kez camp.
If you don't like this sort of speak of gods being on the field and everything, I think it's extremely possible that you can explain these 2 as extremely powerful sorcerers.
Which canonically is what they are, really.
Exactly.
Hey, look at that.
But yeah, Mahali sits down with you, brings you a nice meal, and says, hey, cheer up, I need you to kill my brother.
And hey, to help you out a little bit, I'll turn you invisible.
Party agrees, like, okay, we'll go do it. How do we do it?
Yeah, so that's kind of the big question here, is I think you're going to have some kind of plan in place to, like, how are we going to kill this level 20 sorcerer?
I think that all this really powerful NPC gives an item to the players. Because this, you can't do the thing where Kapol is this crazy powerful sorcerer, like on par almost with Mahali, it seems like. We can't do that, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, but they get a means to be able to do this from the all-powerful sorcerer person.
Chef.
And then it can take whatever flavor you want, yeah.
Yeah. But now we have the classic sneak into the camp and either grab something or assassinate someone. Pretty
This is
straightforward.
greater invisibility, right? They can take actions.
I don't know. Is it? Because he seems to go visible.
Visible. The only caveat that makes them visible is that when they get within Kresimir's sphere of influence.
Oh, that's what it is. Okay. Yeah, at this point, it's kind of like just leave it to the players to do their infiltration however they see fit.
You've done your work as the DM. You know how it all works. Just let them run through it.
This is a tough one, though, because this is kind of a no failure sort of thing. Like, so if the party fails here, like, that's really rough.
That's the end of the campaign.
Yeah, like that could be no, they're gonna kill you. Like, you're in the enemy camp, you're either gonna be captured or killed. And
I would say that if you're taking inspiration from this sequence of events, then you want to combine the events of Taniel sneaking in, combat with Kresimir, and then Kapol sneaking in and saving Taniel after he fails in the first event. So I would say fold these in together, let your party run through and have this combat, but probably have the availability for them to escape as well.
I would have the availability for one of them to be captured so that everyone else can escape, and then you see the one party member.
Ooh.
Yeah, you're just you and this DM, y'all are cold-blooded, Ryan. I just can't.
We like this book, don't we?
Yeah, okay, we do.
I like it. That's brutal, but I love it. I would love that if it happened in a campaign I was in. I'd be like, damn. And that's the moment all the rest of the party got addicted to the drugs you made. Just completely traumatized.
Yeah, what if you're sneaking around this camp while you're invisible on this super secret mission, and the player, the character who is dealing with these addiction issues, walks by?
Yeah,
some of the drug just out there, the substance is available.
You catch a whiff, and you turn and you see two guys huddled around a little fire with their little bowl and stuff, and you're invisible. You could just
This book, man. If you're listening to this and you haven't read this book, just read it
or listen to it. So we just got done. We literally just got done talking about the other stuff in the Crimson campaign, right? So let's move on to Adamat.
Is that what you want to use?
I don't know. We can. It's not like they can tell. They're so stupid.
Because he gets up to quite a bit in this one.
But to start off, the first thing he does is with some soldiers on loan from Tamis, he goes and raids his old country cottage to get his kids back.
Hostage rescue operation, essentially, which I would say is not something you see particularly often on the table, that specific scenario. I mean, definitely there's like rescue missions and things like that, but like this is like almost straight up like the FBI HRT or a SWAT team kind of going in, but within this setting.
Yeah, if this were in D&D, you probably would have quite a bit of setup just to get to this point, to swatting the enemy commander and getting all your kids back.
Yeah, it kind of feels to me like this is an aspect of the game master providing Adamat the opportunity that he didn't get at the end of the last campaign. And most of the time, you want to give that to each character, the opportunity for them to fulfill their quest. And Adamat's whole thing always was just to get his family back. And even in this case, he still doesn't fully succeed.
Well, then he'd retire.
Yeah, well, yeah, then he would retire, yeah. So the encounter is awesome, but it's still, even with its success, it provides more of the same to do.
The GM wants to keep Adamat's character. You can't retire this character.
Good thing you made like 7 kids for some reason in your backstory.
Yeah, GM's dream there. If you're bringing this into your tabletop game, it could very easily be, instead of just what ends up happening to one of his kids is that he's kidnapped and sold off into a slavery with this enemy country. But you could also be like hags. A hag takes one of your kids and replaces it with this clone. That's something that hags do, by the way, if you're not familiar with hags, which is not something that happens in this book, but is an idea of how to affect maybe a party member's child.
Yeah, in this case, I feel like him having been sold into slavery by the Kez, is kind of a device to get Bo, Neela, particularly them, and also Adamat, to the front lines of the war with Kez eventually. I believe that really happens in the third book.
That's a great point. Yeah, the GM thinks ahead of time and has a purpose for one of the kids being kidnapped in order to bring a certain arc or a certain NPC into the campaign itself. Anyway, how do you raid a house? What kind of obstacles do you put
I think obviously the big challenge is the people you don't want to hurt are in there mixed among them somewhere. And, maybe you have a way to find out where they are exactly, which would be very helpful. But if you don't, kind of going in blind, you can't really be using AoE stuff, things like that, for fear of hurting those you don't want to.
And so, your adversaries would definitely use, I don't want to say children's shield, but
What's the
seems like something a bad guy would do.
what's the legal age for being a human shield again?
If they're on the table, then I'm going after them. I think that's a direct quote from Ryan.
He's got 7 of them. He can afford to lose some.
With there being 7, with there being multiple things that you want to protect or people that you want to keep safe, it makes sense to have them in separate rooms throughout the house.
I maybe wouldn't necessarily have like 1 to a room, but I would definitely have them a little bit scattered. I might have like them grouped into one room mainly, like that's where the this is where we keep the hostages. But there might be a few in other rooms for whatever purposes. Like they might be force them to serve them food and things like that, or they might just be have them handy to use as a human shield.
Or maybe 1 probably is the most effective number here, just being used as a shield, while the rest are. I would probably throw them in a basement if I could. Something that's only got 1 entrance, that's easy to barricade, easy to talk between. But I was going to ask, what kind of, like, if this were not Flintlock Fantasy, what kind of monsters would you put in here?
You go in expecting you to have to, like, take out the hostage takers, the bad guys, and you burst into the house, and then it's just empty. And you're like, okay, we just you're going to check this next room, and it's empty. And maybe you start, like, hearing them, like, hey, help us, or whatever. And you go, and then suddenly you're confused, like, where the hell are they all? And then, boom, the house starts attacking you.
That's great. You have, like, a little boss, or maybe you promote him to being, like, someone actually important, but, like, some kind of spellcaster with AoE to take out this army that you're bringing into the house. And maybe he's got access to, like, Magic Mouth.
Oh, yeah.
Which is a spell where you can just, like, put a mouth somewhere and it can, like, talk. And you're like,
help me,
I'm over here. And then it's like a
Daddy,
spike
we're in here. Please go into this room recklessly.
Maybe there are shapeshifters holding the kids hostage. And so you have to then determine, is this my kid or is this a shapeshifter?
God.
I thought making the whole house a mimic was a pretty cruel idea, but Steve, you just took it like a step further.
You're super happy. The kid, like, runs up to hug you and then shanks you in the liver. Like,
so point being, with a hostage rescue situation, there's a lot to play with, and it can be a very, very challenging encounter. Both like on the table, rolling dice, in combat, and like narratively. Maybe you accidentally kill a hostage.
That's good character development. Sad character development, but at least in the book, this is just the way they get started. But it kind of got me thinking: what if like you have a time skip in your campaign, and then you finally get to this point, and just sort of run your new leveled up characters into it with no prep. You just tell them the situation and go. Would you guys be open in doing something like that?
So are you talking about like between the events of the previous book and this?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It does lend itself pretty well to that because you kind of wrapped up one thing. You've got more to come, but there is like the opportunity for basically some downtime.
Yeah, and if Adamat, his character wasn't in his family wasn't involved in the epic conclusion of last campaign, but that was his main driver. So then I like the idea that the DM takes a break, puts together another climactic battle thing, and then when we come back and you kind of do a little prologue build up to this new session that's kind of like epic conclusion 2.0, that is also the lead up into the new arc for Adamat too. The campaign continues.
Yeah, a pretty good idea in this case. And his wife is still unaccounted for.
You're now back in the city. Your kids are ostensibly as happy as they can be given the situation, and now you're back in the primary setting for the campaign.
Yeah, so this is kind of set up for like an urban mystery, working with what resources you have within the city, which for Adamat is actually quite a bit, which I think is a good place to start for a campaign like this or an arc like this. Is
having friends in high places or low places I think is a definite like necessity in this. It's fun for the characters to be able to leverage those, right?
With any mystery, with any urban setting, and we talked about this in the last campaign too, with all the Tamas's council, with all the various factions.
Yeah.
Rivals in different parties, factions with their own agendas. You keep rolling with that, make new factions even, and have connections to your party members, you know? And that's kind of what I think is done with Fell, and finding out that Fell is from the same finishing school as Vetus.
Be a pretty cool backstory, especially if it like links up, kind of went to the same place as one of the big villains.
Yeah, that's a crazy backstory.
Yeah. But yeah, you mentioned factions, and I think this like urban, like big city setting is great to play with factions, because I think in this big urban environment, there's going to be quite a few of them from various places. Like we talk about political factions, crime factions, in this case, the unions, which I think is really cool. And most importantly, I think, is they're all going to be in this one place interacting with each other very frequently. So there's a lot more chance for those interactions.
Yeah, it really is the best setting.
I mean, yeah, city gives you a lot to play with.
So Adamat figures out that his child was sold from a specific group of slavers and taken across the Adsea to like a small port town on the other side. So now he has a destination in
Ad town.
Ad town.
Probably.
On the ad ship. He doesn't end up finding his kid. He's too late. Which, dang, if that happened at the table, that would be a gut punch, right? Because you're ostensibly, as a party, maybe taking 2 sessions, 3 sessions of effort into doing this, and
yeah, it's not very often that you're strung along for ultimately nothing. Normally, I think it's generally good practice. The GM will throw you a bone of some sort, whether it be treasure at the end of the dungeon or some piece of information or something. But in this case, it's just kind of a well, darn.
I would say that you need to provide parameters for how this is going to happen. You have exactly 3 days to get to that ad port, and if you don't, your son will be gone, and something like that. Adamat doesn't get that information in the book, but the player at the table should.
I don't know. There could be value in that, especially if you need to kind of hurry them along. But I do think there's a little bit of value, at least, in kind of keeping the mystery going. This kind of is a mystery arc. So I don't know if they necessarily need that, but it could be a useful tool if you need to kind of hurry them along somewhere or give them a definitive goal or just put the pressure on.
Being sold into Kez slavery seems really final to me. That seems like the end point.
Definitely be very sad. And, the culmination of an arc doesn't have to be in victory.
Yeah, very true.
But, I mean, there's also the fact that his wife is still missing, so he does have, something else to do.
Yeah, that's true.
So he's not kind of just like, okay, well, I lost. That's the end of my arc. No, he's...
Ostensibly, so do the other characters in the party, right?
I mean, in this case, if it's like, hey, we need to help this character rescue their family, I think that's a good reason for the rest of the party to just go along. And it can be, you can focus on, one character in the party for an arc for a little bit.
Yeah. So eventually, it gets to the point to where Adamat has to go up against his nemesis, the person who's put him through all of this anguish and terror. And you figure out that you find through your amazing investigative skill that he has a manor house, kind of like in the middle of the city in like a nice area. But the most important thing you learn is that he has a powerful, this is a low magic setting, a powerful mage with him. And if your setting is not low magic, he's even got an even scarier mage with him.
Yes.
Yeah, this caster is able to probably wipe the floor with your party. That's the kind of vibe you want to set as the GM, right?
And that can be anything. Yeah, you can't just attack the house like you did at the very beginning of this campaign.
Oh, because what if the house is a mimic?
What if the city is a mimic?
There's no way they'll do the house mimic thing twice.
Yeah, there's no way he'll do it twice. Yeah. But yeah, like Steve said, it doesn't even have to be a caster. It could just be something that can wipe the floor with you.
And so now, if you haven't already, this is the time to really leverage the connections you've made, the relationships you've formed with different factions.
Yeah, ideally, as a GM, you're looking at your characters' backstories and seeing who can do what and whose NPCs around them can do what. Like, if you know a guy who just so happens to be like, yeah, I'm a big game hunter and I'm an expert at hunting giant magical animals, then maybe, Vetus has a giant magical animal in his house. At least within this setting, though, okay, he's got a privileged. We'll go get our own. But maybe you go and hire like a mage breaker or something, or figuring out a way to turn off wards or to nullify magic.
Yeah, and so ultimately what Adamant needs to do is bribe someone in order to get the privileged out of this prison. Bo, of course.
Yeah, and especially what if one of the characters' friends is the privileged that you need to collect the bribe for? So, you can tie in another character's story there.
Yeah, it's always good to pull from backstories.
This is, for all intents and purposes, the finale for this arc. And the plan is to remove the boss from the dungeon and then save the game or save the day, right? So as the GM, you can't have that. They strike while the boss is gone. But it kind of goes almost according to plan.
On the other hand, though, I do want to say, like, if they have this plan, right, to lure the boss out, and it goes off, they pass their rolls, do reward them for that, for a plan, coming together. It doesn't have to be. They're not ruining your dungeon. They're just playing the game. But that said, I do think it would be conducive to fun by having the dungeon be a little more challenging, even without the boss.
So how do you shake things up then if the boss is gone?
Well, I might throw a second caster in that none of them expected.
What a great idea!
Wow, that's really original.
Yeah,
and it worked.
Yeah, I just came up with that on the spot.
Give your thugs maybe some special abilities, because there will just be some. Like Knacked, basically. Put some Knacked in there that have just one little special ability to make a fight unique.
I like the idea that maybe if this is in a more fantastic world, you have something like a Necromancer that can just keep opening a portal to skeletons. And so you just never you have an unending amount of skeletons coming at you.
So many skeletons.
Until you kill him or them. By having a constant threat, so it's harder to explore.
I do think you can kind of go about it in a couple ways, but you can make your enemies stronger or more sort of useful, or you can make the environment more dangerous for the party. Or you can do both.
There is one big problem here, though, adapting it into a tabletop, is that how do you allow for something like a resting period to heal?
To me, this seems like a time when you don't get that rest opportunity, honestly.
Yeah, I don't see why the rest would happen.
Interesting. Okay.
I think this is something that happens relatively quickly, and it because it's something that you've been planning for a while. Oh, so you're going into this as prepared as possible to try to go and get it done quickly.
I just had a very crazy idea that I don't even want to say here because I want to use it on you guys. Anyway, back to Adamat. The day is saved until it's not. The boss comes back into the encounter. Let's just say that, you are able to finagle this as a GM, which I think would be a really cool moment. And you're already probably tired and messed up from having to go through the dungeon in the first place.
Yeah, that might be, if you need a rest, that might be the time to get it.
But considering this villain, let's say we're victorious and you have him, you've defeated him. Do you take him hostage like you did in the book? Or do you just kill him? And then if you do take him hostage, what do you do with him? What is the satisfying moment for the PC where he's had enough or they've had enough?
See, I, as a player, I'm always wanting to take hostages where possible. But also I'm a fan of those emotionally satisfying moments where someone just gets their revenge. Even if it might be a better idea to keep them alive and question them, you can't deny it'd be a cool moment if Adamant's like, no, fuck this. I'm doing bad at the not cursing things.
As a player, I think that I would more lean towards getting my revenge. But he's trying to get his
It
son
depends
back,
which
too.
character I'm... Sorry, go ahead.
No, that was just it. It was like, it depends on, like, what you were just about to say, Nate. Like, it depends on the player. It depends on the character that they're playing, too.
It depends on the character I'm playing for sure. And if I'm not the one whose family it is, I'll probably be like, don't kill him, dude. Don't kill him. He might have information. We can get this stuff. But my character would be like, oh, why'd you do that if they kill him? But me as a player, I'd be like, yeah, get it.
I feel like we've had that happen before. No, that's funny.
But for now, is there any most D&D moments?
I do have one. The infiltration of the camp after Mahali turns Daniel invisible. He goes and realizes he still makes noise, and he steps on a stick. And then one of the sentries is like,
God,
hey.
this is my... Oh, my God.
That's why I spoke quick. I knew I had to grab that one up.
The funniest part in the whole audiobook, man.
He breaks the stick, and the sentry out there is like, hey, who goes there? And then another voice responds like, it's me, you idiot.
And the voice is right next to Daniel.
Yeah, that's just like, okay, you failed your stealth roll pretty badly here, even at advantage, but I don't want that to mean the whole freaking camp wakes up and immediately murders you, so we're going to do this.
Oh, well, I got to think of another one.
Yeah, why don't you give us yours in the meantime,
mine
Steve?
is The Mist.
The Mist.
This is just straight up, like, he asks for help, and the DM gives him the most advantageous thing he could possibly give him, covering up the trenches. And if the player asks to make a religion check, and then they roll really high, then, that kind of ties your hands there, too.
No, it absolutely doesn't, I would say.
It rains hellfire on the enemy army.
The sky opens up, the ground splits
rolling a nat 20 on a religion check is not like a wish spell.
No, I persuade you to slit your own throat. That's
that's kind of the same vein,
5% of the time, I'm going to ask someone to kill themselves.
I'm going to ask for the most I could possibly ask for in that moment.
Well, all right, y'all. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Well, all right, y'all. Thank you so much for listening.
I wish you could see my face.
I was waiting for you to talk so I could do that.
I know what you were doing, okay? I know. Thank you for listening, everyone. We do other stuff, too. Look at it.